Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. My name is Eleanor Hart, but most people in Charleston call me Ellie. I'm 65, a widow, and the kind of CPA who keeps a pencil sharpener on the desk and a ledger balanced to the penny. I slipped my late husband's pocket watch into the inside pocket of my blazer and walked into the law office on Broad Street, where lemon oil lived in the wood, and the old ceiling fan ticked like a metronome. The conference room ran long and narrow-paneled in dark heart pine. Sunlight came in thin bars through the shutters, laying stripes across a table lacquered to a quiet shine. Martin Cole Robb's estate attorney sat at the head with the calm of a man who files his socks. He was already squared to the stack of folders arranged by color, a fountain pen leveled with the blotter. Nathan, my son, had taken the chair on the left and was worrying the edge of his cuff, as if the thread there held a secret. On the right sat Tessa, his wife's silk scarf, tucked like a flag perfume, clean and sharp. Riley Robb's oldest from before me leaned back 2 seats down, one ankle slung over a knee, the smile on his face meant for a room that wasn't listening. Mrs. Hart, Martin said, standing. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," I said. My voice carried fine without help. I took the end seat nearest the window and laid my palm on the cool wood. Outside, farther than it sounded, a freight horn moaned from the rail yard, low and patient. Tessa clicked her nails once on the table, a bright little sound. "Martin, we've got a decorator at 2, she said, half smiling. "If we can keep this tidy, I'd be grateful." Riley's grin slanted. Nathan cleared his throat. He didn't look at me. "We'll proceed in order," Martin said, sitting. "Primary will first, then recorded instruments tied to the estate, then, if necessary, additional directives." He opened the top folder, the one with the red ribbon at the clasp. "Robert Hart executed this will 2 years ago," he read, voice even. Legal words lined up and marched, bequeathed devise residue. I listened like I always had when paperwork mattered, quiet, still counting what counted. Tessa made a small face at Riley, then looked my way with a smile that felt like a compliment wrapped around a dare. "You'll love the guest cottage once we put new paint on it," she said lightly. "We'll leave you a couple of herb pots, for nostalgia." Riley let out one sound that wasn't exactly a laugh. Nathan stared at his cuff again. I reached 2 fingers to the pocket watch and felt the shallow dent in the case where Rob had dropped it on the dock one summer. He used to tell me when our first business breathed more hope than cash, "Paper doesn't bluff, Ellie. It tells you what's true if you let it." Martin turned a page. "There is also a codicil," he said, and the air shifted. "Executed 72 hours before Mr. Hart's passing. We'll address it after the base document." He set a slim, sealed envelope beside the stack. Nathan's head came up. "A codicil?" he asked. "Yes," Martin said. "Signed, witness, notarized." Tessa's smile thinned to thread. She looked at the envelope like it had chosen the wrong table. The ceiling fan ticked on. Sunlight moved half an inch. Martin finished the preamble and closed the folder with care. He reached for a heavier binder labeled in block letters property deeds and operating agreements. The hinges creaked once as it opened. "Before distribution language governs anything else," he said, "we clarify title. Charleston County records show the primary residence located at Cypress Hill parcel ending in 42, recorded June 3, 1998. He slid a stamped copy into the light. "Title is vested in the Eleanor M. Hart Revocable Living Trust. Trustee Eleanor M. Hart." Tessa blinked twice. Riley sat forward. Nathan found my face for the first time and didn't seem to know where to put his eyes. "That can't be right," Tessa said quickly, the words polished by habit. "Rob built that house." "He did," Martin said. "And he placed it under joint trust management. No liens, no transfers, no reassignment since. The clerk's stamps are there." He tapped the rectangles of blue ink with the back of his pen. Riley worked his jaw. "So the house isn't in the will?" "It is not part of the distributable estate," Martin said. Silence arrived as if it had been waiting in the hall. I kept my hand on the table and let the cool travel up into my arm. The pocket watch sat against my ribs, warm from my walk. The freight horn sounded again, distant and sure. Tessa's smile went powdery. "Fine," she said, too bright. "Then the company." Martin didn't sigh. He flipped a divider in the same binder and brought out a slim operating agreement, the kind with more signature pages than anyone reads unless they mean to. "Heartstone Holdings, LLC." He read, "Organized in the state of South Carolina. Per the operating agreement, amended and restated 5 years ago, executive authority is delegated to the Hart Trust, same trust, while day-to-day management may be assigned by the trustee." He placed that document next to the deed papers like bookends. Nathan's voice came softer than I remembered it. "Mom," he said, "did you know? I keep books," I said. "I read what I sign." Riley's chair made a small scrape. He looked at Martin as if translation were possible. So who decides? The trustee, Martin said. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't have to. Tessa took a breath that stuck halfway. She pressed her lips together until the color went. Her perfume clean and sharp before thin to the point you noticed it trying. Martin capped his pen, uncapped it, set it straight again. We'll return to specific bequests under the will, he said. But the framework stands the residence and controlling governance of Heartstone remain under Mrs. Hart's living trust. Any distribution we consider today must respect those instruments. No one argued. The fan kept time. I watched dust lift in the light and settle again, the lazy fall of it. On summer afternoons when work ran long, Rob and I used to count the slow seconds between barges on the Ashley and guess the cargo by the sound. There's a difference between a load of steel and a stack of tile if you've listened long enough. Numbers have that same music. So do people. Nathan cleared his throat once more and failed to say anything. Riley's eyes had lost their grin. Tessa studied the edge of her nail where polish had gone thin. "Do you need a moment?" Martin asked. "We're fine," I said. He nodded, grateful for instruction he didn't have to own, and squared the binder to the table's grain. Outside, a gull threw one quick sharp note into the morning and was done. Martin reached for the codicil and rested his hand on it a beat. Not for drama, only for order. "Very well," he said. "We'll proceed in sequence." He didn't open it yet. He didn't need to. Every person at that table knew what the papers already knew. The pocket watch warmed against my chest as if a thumb had found it. I folded my hands and waited while the clock I carried and the fan above us chose the same steady pace. Nothing in the room moved but breath and paper. Martin slid the codicil aside and reached for a thinner folder the color of a stop sign. He didn't announce it with a throat clearing or a sermon. He just set it in the light where everyone could see and undid the brass prongs. "This is compliance," he said. The air in the room changed half a degree. Nothing you could measure with a tool, only with a neck. The ceiling fan ticked steady as a second hand. He laid out a set of copies. On top, a promissory note for $80,000, date stamped 4 months after Rob's diagnosis. Beneath it, a deed of trust form where the words Cypress Hill Primary Residence appeared in the collateral box like a dare. Borrower of record. Martin read Tessa L. Hart, secured by real property described as... He moved his finger down the page. This property is not in fact available to secure anything. It sits inside Mrs. Hart's living trust. Without trustee consent, this document is void on its face. Tessa laughed once the sound brittled on the edges. "That's a mistake. Calvin handled the paperwork." Calvin, Martin asked neutral. "Calvin Rhodes," she said. "Rhodes Advisory. He said a bridge loan makes everyone look more liquid. It was a positioning move." Martin placed the second document in front of her, an invoice on a glossy template. "Rhodes Advisory, embossed like a boutique. $20,000 strategic consulting fee." "Positioning," he said mildly. "I see." Riley whistled under his breath and let it die. Nathan had gone very still. "We can unwind it," Tessa pressed. "The bank will." She stopped. Her eyes flicked to the line where she'd signed ink strong and final the way people sign when they believe the moment is too small to matter. "The bank will void the lien once the true title is clarified," Martin said. "But the funds, those traveled, we'll need to source and document them." "Source them from where?" Riley asked. Martin turned over the next page. It wasn't Milan or Paris. It was closer a South Carolina Amex statement with a run of charges. King Street Boutique Hotel in Charlotte, 2 weekends in a row, flights purchased through a travel portal for a Design Expo linate proof that the bridge had spanned more than one kind of river. Tessa found something on the table to fix her scarf. She worked the silk until the knot held a little too tight. "That expo was for business," she said. "Presentation matters. Investors look for polish." "Investors look for books," I said. "Polish is a bonus." She didn't look up. Nathan did. He looked at me as if those 10 words had been a door he hadn't expected to open. Martin straightened the stack until its corners behaved. "We'll return to this after we document the second matter." "The second," Tessa started. He had already reached for a gray folder, thicker the edges penciled in the way clerks do when a file has gone a few rounds. "Heartstone operating account," he said. 3 transfers across 8 weeks. 120,000, 100,000, 80,000 even. Destination a law office in North Carolina escrow account. Closing statement attached. He set down the HUD sheet. Lake Pine Cabin, the title block read. The photo clipped to the top showed a brown A-frame with a deck that faced water as smooth as cut stone. Riley leaned back and barked a dry laugh. "A cabin." Nathan swallowed. "I was going to put it back." Martin didn't say, "You always were." He put a pen on the closing statement so it wouldn't slide. "Recorded purpose in our ledger," he said, reads, "Executive Retreat." There's no board approval notation. There's no amortization schedule. Nathan's face shaded red high on the cheekbones the way it had when he was 12 and ruined a lawnmower blade on a hidden rock. Dad used to take time by the river when things were tight. After he got sick, clients started pushing timelines I couldn't hit. I thought if I had somewhere quiet, I could think us into daylight. Did it work? Riley asked too fast. No, Nathan said. The bid I counted on fell apart. Then we lost 2 installs in the same month. I told myself I'd sell the place in spring and settle it. Then spring came and I didn't. The fan turned. The room held. I let my palm find the pocket watch again. Rob had carried it after his father kept it in a drawer when phones took over time, then started wearing it the year we opened our first shop, because he said its weight in his pocket reminded him to check the simple things: gas in the truck, fuel in the men, cash in the account. Martin slid a clear sleeve out of the gray folder and laid it in front of Nathan. 2 of the transfers show your initials, he said. The 3rd a stamp. Nathan looked. I stamped that one. We were already behind. I knew if I touched a keyboard any longer, I'd talk myself out of it. His voice had dropped somewhere no one could reach with a hand. Riley's ankle came off his knee. His foot hit the floor and stayed. Martin set his pen down. Before we go further, he said, calm as a ledger line, there's context you deserve. He closed the gray folder and opened a blue one I hadn't seen him pull. The top page bore seals and signatures. Behind it came a row of certificates, then a grainy photograph of a storefront I remembered, because the paint on the sign took 3 tries to land right. Heartstone Accounting and Contracts, beside a tidy scroll of ivy. Miss Eleanor M. Hart. He read Master of Business Administration, University of Georgia. Certified Public Accountant. Active license at the time of Heartstone's formation. Another page. Corporate resolution appointing interim executive authority to Mrs. Hart during Mr. Hart's surgery and rehabilitation year. Payroll registers signatures here, here, and here. He placed the ledger printouts in the light. My handwriting walked across the margins in pencil notations. Careful square, a habit I never did put down. Tessa's mouth opened and shut once. You never know one said. It wasn't required, Martin said. Nathan reached without thinking, the way his hand used to reach for mine crossing Meeting Street at Rush. He stopped before he touched anything, as if touching would turn history into a trick. She kept the lights on, Martin said. He didn't look at me like he wanted credit for saying it. When Mr. Hart traveled to Drumwork, she balanced the calendar and the cash. When he came home, he took the client dinners. There are different ways to hold a company in your hands. Riley leaned forward with his elbows on the table. He had put his grin away. So, what are we doing here? You read us into a wall and now we're supposed to apologize to the woodwork. We're going to write down what is true, Martin said. Then we're going to correct what can be corrected. He reached into his breast pocket and brought out something no thicker than a stack of receipts, flat black, with a single button on the edge. He set it down, clicked, and the small speaker filled the room with a voice I knew before sound. Rob's softer than it was in person tin on the top frequencies, and warm under it the way machines catch men. If you're listening, he said, it means I'm not there to listen back. Ellie, you told me once paper doesn't bluff. You were right. If there's a dispute, follow the paper. If there's pride, let the paper out stubborn it. Nathan, you don't have to carry a room with your shoulders. Tessa polish is fine, but you can't spend shine. Riley, don't hide in the cheap seats. Be useful or be quiet. The device clicked again when it ended. No one breathed for 1 beat more than was comfortable. Martin slid it aside. Mr. Hart recorded that the week he signed the codicil, he said, he asked me to hold it. Tessa's eyes glossed. She blinked hard enough to reset them. I didn't mean... She stopped. Her hands had gone quiet. Nathan rubbed a thumb against his other palm, a little circle he'd made his whole life when he was trying to choose between 2 bad exits. I can write a check, I said. All 3 heads turned. If I had opened the window and called gulls into the room, they wouldn't have looked faster. I said again. The trust has the capacity. Tessa inhaled. Riley's shoulders came up. Nathan's chin lifted as if the sentence had ropes under it. I won't, I said. The shoulders dropped. Not to the floor, to the truth. I won't make this a magic eraser, I said even. We correct. We don't hide. We put numbers back where they belong, and we lay down a structure that holds. I'll sell the cabin, Nathan said. His voice wasn't dramatic. It was tired and clear. That will help, Martin said. But we'll need more than cash. We'll need a record of acknowledgement. We'll need a plan the bank and the books recognize. Tessa's mouth twitched around a word she didn't use. I can return the dress, she said, suddenly smaller than silk. It's not the dress, I said. It's the habit that bought it. She looked up at me as if she'd just found out the room had windows. Martin gathered the red and gray folders and made a neat stack, as if neatness could teach nerves. Here's what we do today, he said. We document. We sign acknowledgments of the 2 transactions and the attempted encumbrance. We begin voiding the lien with the lender. We add Rhodes Advisory to a list we'll forward to the Financial Integrity Office. After that, we'll sit with Mrs. Hart and outline conditions that satisfy law and ledger both. Riley frowned. Conditions, structure, Martin said, not punishment, the shape of correction. I looked out the window a moment. A tug inched a barge upstream slow enough to look still until you picked a bolt on the railing and watched it move against a live oak trunk. That's how some kinds of work go so slow they hide themselves in motion. Nathan spoke first, voice steadying. "I'll sign." Tessa nodded, eyes on the red folder. "Me too." Riley tapped the table once, then flattened his hand. "And I'll stay," he said, "however you line it out." Martin slid 2 acknowledgement forms across along with pens that had weight. The room went to ink and dates. "Paper doesn't bluff," Rob had said. "It only waits." When the copies were done, Martin placed them in sleeves, marked the tabs with a pencil, and tucked the stack back into order. He reached for the codicil envelope and laid it on the blotter again, not opening it, only centering it like a compass. "We'll enter this next," he said after a short recess. "There's coffee down the hall." "No," I said. "Let's keep our seats." Martin searched my face as if for a reason he might need to put in a memo. He found one he could live with and nodded. "Very well." He didn't break rhythm when he spoke the formal line to the record. He only gave the room time to breathe the way a good drummer makes the chorus fall in the pocket. Then he brought the codicil into the light, slit the seal with a ruled knife, and slid the single sheet free. I felt the pocket watch against my ribs again, warm as a palm. Nathan sat straighter. Tessa's hands had folded into something like prayer without the pose. Riley's eyes were on the text, not the theater. The fan ticked. The papers waited. The river moved the way rivers do, unhurrying, exact. Martin lifted the single sheet from the codicil envelope and read without theater. The fan ticked its slow measure above us. The river kept its own. "Robert Hart hereby reaffirms the placement of the residence and controlling governance of Hartstone Holdings within the Eleanor M. Hart Revocable Living Trust," he said. He further directs that any decision materially affecting title debt or capital allocation shall require trustee authorization. Fiduciary oversight is vested in the trustee. Day-to-day management may be delegated at the trustee's discretion. He set the page where the light could have it. No one argued with the sentence that held the room steady. Oversight belonged at my end of the table until the papers said otherwise. Riley scratched once at the stubble on his jaw and didn't finish the motion. Nathan kept his eyes on the lower margin where Rob's signature narrowed on the flourish the way it always had when he signed something he meant. Tessa sat so straight the scarf at her throat quit moving. "The codicil bears full formalities," Martin said. "Witnessed here, notarized here, date time." He laid a finger on the stamp and then took his hand back as if the page had a temperature. "Before we return to bequests," he went on, "I'm recommending a separate instrument, a consent settlement to address the 2 financial matters we documented. The question of title is settled. The question of harm can be managed. If all parties agree, we can keep this in civil channels and satisfy both ledger and law." He turned to me. I nodded once. Martin drew a new folder from his briefcase, green as a Charleston shutter. "Terms are drafted," he said. Not as punishment, but as framework. He spoke it the way a builder names a beam. Nathan's voice came low. "What does it ask?" "It monetizes the shortfall, $250,000, in combined exposures, then conditions reduction. If every requirement is met for the duration, the balance steps down to $70,000 at completion. That number moves only in one direction down, with performance up with breach." Tessa blinked. The room held. During the term, Martin continued employment within Hartstone at a standardized hourly rate. Transparent expense logs, periodic reviews with finance, no discretionary spending from shared funds. Acknowledgements, first signatures after. He didn't list every line. He didn't need to. The bones were plain. Riley folded his arms like a man testing how a jacket fits. "How long is the term?" 5 years, Martin said. "Shorter if excellence is sustained and documented." He slid the first page toward Nathan. "There's a place for your name." Nathan didn't touch the pen. He looked at me instead, not for a rescue, only for an anchor. "Read it," I said, "then sign." He read. When he reached the end, he didn't rush. He placed his hand on the table, flattened it, and nodded. "All right." Tessa's turn. She hovered over the text, eyes skimming and stopping, then going back. When she reached the clause about discretionary purchases, her throat moved. "I understand," she said, almost to the paper. Riley leaned so he could see, "and me." "You can be included," Martin said. "Shared work makes lighter weather of it." Riley grunted once the sound a yes by other means. I reached into my bag and brought out the only thing Rob ever kept fancier than a tackle box, a black lacquer fountain pen he used for the good signatures. I set it between Nathan and Tessa and let it sit there a second longer than necessary. The pocket watch rested warm against my ribs. "Use this," I said. "Ink should mean something." The pen made a small weight in each hand. Names went on lines. Dates went under. Martin's pen clicked and stopped clicking. Tessa kept her fingers on the pen after she'd finished. She took a slow breath and pressed her palm flat below her name like she was holding it in place. Then a flicker crossed her face, quick, private, not made for the room. "Martin," she said, voice steady but thinner before we finish. "May I have a minute?" He glanced at me. I nodded. Tessa turned her chair an inch in my direction. "I found out last night," she said, and put a hand at her middle, small and sure. "I'm pregnant." The sentence didn't ask for anything. It put a new fact on the table and let it stand upright. Nathan's chair scraped softly. His mouth opened, and then found a better thing to do. He reached for her hand and held it like a man who had been given something to carry and would. Riley exhaled through his nose. Martin sat very still and let the air find its level. "All right," I said. It was a single word built to hold several. Tessa nodded once, as if permission had been in question, and now wasn't. She slid the pen back to the blotter. Martin stacked the signed pages, tapped them square, and slid them into sleeves. "We'll attach these to the file," he said. "Compliance will have its own folder. Finance training runs weekly, supervised by Ms. Priya Shah, our CFO." "Priya's still with us?" Riley asked. "She is," I said. "She'll keep the books honest and your assumptions lean." The meeting shifted from paper to movement. A clerk came and went with a cart. Coffee arrived and sat unnoticed. A gull threw another clean note into the morning and didn't repeat itself. We took a short break because Martin called it a recess, and rooms like this respect the word. When we reconvened, he closed the will and codicil, added a brass clip across both, and marked the spine in pencil. "Heart executed." The pencil left a quiet ridge. "Estate business inside the will is concluded for today," he said. "House and company stand where they stood when Mr. Hart signed. The consent settlement governs restitution. We'll circulate certified copies by afternoon." He didn't ask if anyone had questions. Questions had already been answered or delayed with signatures. He rose. We stood. The fan kept time. On Broad Street, heat had started its work. The air looked clean and bright enough to touch, and the palm outside the window threw shadows like ladders on the brick. Nathan held the door for Tessa, and in that small act I saw a man trying, not posing. Riley waited for me with his hand on the jamb, and then remembered himself and moved, creating room. Martin walked us to the front where wood darkened from 100 years of care. "Priya will expect you at finance on Thursday," he said, looking at Nathan first, then at Tessa. "Orientation and operations begins in the yard at 6 tomorrow. Sign-in is at the trailer. Closed-toe boots." "Boots I have," Riley said. Tessa gave a quick breath that resembled a laugh. "I'll find mine." Outside, Charleston laid its pieces in order. A tug pushing upriver. A delivery truck easing a ramp. A woman in a visor counting receipts at a sidewalk table with a rubber band on her wrist. People do what they're built for when the hour tells them. We walked to the curb, as 4 then turned to 3 when Martin went back inside to bind the day. Riley peeled off toward his old pickup parked under a live oak heavy with air plants. Nathan looked at Tessa, then at me. "I'll bring her home," he said. "All right," I said. They crossed the street. A bicycle bell chimed once and disappeared wheels, whispering like a pencil dragged sideways across paper. Work started the next morning before the sun gave much light. Dew lifted off the St. Augustine grass in a low shimmer. The yard behind Hearthstone smelled like wet soil and new lumber, the way it does when pallets arrive too early and men roll them to the right places by feel. Nathan stepped out of the truck and stood for a second measuring the ground. He had the look of a man finding out how to be heavy in a better way. He signed the clipboard the foreman held out, took a pair of gloves from a box and slid them on. No speech, no ceremony. He wheeled a barrow toward the mulch bay and waited his turn. Tessa climbed the office trailer steps with a notepad tucked under her arm and a hair tie she'd already used once this morning and would again. She paused at the threshold, smoothed a palm over the top sheet, and went inside. Priya sat at the far desk with 3 monitors and a mug that said, "Payroll is a love language," in small black letters. She looked up, read the room in a beat, and pointed to a chair beside her. "Let's start with chart of accounts," she said. "Then receipts. Accuracy first." Riley pulled on boots older than some of the tools and joined a 2-man crew at the hose reel where someone had left a problem in a tangle. He didn't tell them how they'd done it wrong. He put his hands on the kink and shook it till the water ran clean, then passed the nozzle to the youngest and took the muddy end for himself. By 7, the yard found its rhythm. Engines coughed and settled. A forklift trundled a stack of pavers across the line and set them down with a clack you hear in your teeth. Someone shouted a measure, not angry, just precise. The sun pushed above the warehouse roof and turned the exhaust into a ribbon. I stood at the edge where the concrete met the cracked oyster shell path and let the breeze light on my face. The pocket watch warmed in my palm. The numbers would be mine to watch. The work would belong to the hands that did it. Priya's blinds drew half open. On her desk, Tessa bent to a spreadsheet and began again when Priya touched a cell and shook her head. Out in the yard, Nathan took second load, then third, and didn't count either. Riley adjusted his cap and lifted the other end of a bench someone had been trying to move alone. None of it solved a ledger. All of it pointed in the right direction. The day made a shape and held it. The river moved exact as ever. The fan at Broad Street had its own job now. Ours was here. The hour set itself and the work answered. Winter came on a gray tide that softened the edges of everything. The St. Augustine went dull. The wind moved through the live oaks with a dry hush, and the crews pulled hoodies over their caps before dawn. Work kept its rhythm. Then one morning, the rhythm missed a beat. Tessa's name wasn't on the sign-in sheet. I was on the yard early, pocket watch in my palm, when Nathan crossed from the truck line with the look a man wears when his chest has more air than it needs, and none of it feels useful. "She didn't sleep," he said. "I'm taking her in."
"Go," I said. "Call when the doctor speaks."
He nodded and was halfway to the gate before he remembered the clipboard. He handed it to Riley, who took it without comment and pivoted toward the loading bay, already counting who could cover what. By noon, the sky had lowered and the first cold spatter began. My phone buzzed. Nathan's voice was steady by effort. "They've admitted her, early. They're trying to slow it." "Text the room number," I said. "I'm coming." At the hospital, the hallway carpet hushed every footfall. Machines blinked in tidy colors beside Tessa's bed. She looked smaller against the white hair pulled back in one rough loop, the scarf a memory. "It's too soon," she said, eyes clear. "I know," I said. I stood where she could see me without turning her head. Nathan sat with both elbows on his knees and his hands clasped as if the posture itself held warming power. I took out a manila folder from my bag, the consent settlement with a blank section labeled Modifications. Martin met me at the elevator, coat wet at the shoulders, and we found a counter in a quiet corner. The clause we wrote was simple and held compassionate leave. No penalty hours restored, later records kept clean. He signed where an attorney signs. I initialed where a trustee initials. It read like a bridge. When we went back in, Nathan stood. I slid the page onto the tray table.
"This adjusts the hours," I said. "Your time belongs here until she's home."
He tried to speak. The sound that came was a nod. Tessa's eyes blurred and cleared in one blink. She pressed her hand against her middle, small and resolute. 2 days later, the room turned soft with a different kind of light. Nurses moved with the focused quiet of experts. A cry like torn paper in rain came brief and fierce. Nathan stood rooted as if his boots had grown into the tile. When someone placed a swaddled bundle in Tessa's arms, the whole frame of her loosened and held at the same time. "She's early," he said, voice low, "but strong." "What do you call her?" I asked. "Hope," Tessa whispered. I bent and touched the blanket with 2 fingers, the way you touch a new leaf. She breathed a small, determined engine. Back at the yard, the ledger didn't stop. Riley took the morning safety talk and kept it to 7 minutes, as a man should when frost is in the air. Priya redlined a set of invoices and set Tessa's chair beside her monitor empty, but waiting. Nathan split his day's hospital until visiting hours ended the yard after sundown. No speeches, only the steady arithmetic of catching up. When he showed up, he took the job no one wanted and didn't explain himself. That week, Priya came to my office with a folder thicker than the weather wanted. "Roads," she said. She set down a stack, an invoice without a federal ID, a P.O. box address in a strip mall. 3 counties over, 3 wire confirmations that bounced through an intermediate account named like a shell on a beach. 5 vowels, 2 consonants, no business behind it. She had marked the mismatched dates in green, the rounded numbers in orange. "Martin," I said. He came with his ruled knife and the patience he wore for court filings. We spread the pages across my desk and followed the money the way a hand follows a seam. The wires ran simple and then crooked. The crooked parts told us where to knock. We scheduled time at the hospital when Tessa could sit upright without fussing the monitors. "Martin asked questions you can answer with facts," she answered. When she didn't know, she said she didn't know. When she remembered language Calvin had used, "Bridge window dressing, everyone does this." Priya wrote the words exactly as they were said. We stacked emails printed from a phone text with timestamps and email signature with a logo that pixelated when magnified. Paper doesn't bluff, and sometimes a JPEG won't either. "I signed things I didn't read," Tessa said. "He said it was safe." Martin capped his pen. "We'll send this to Financial Integrity," he said. "You'll give a statement. The record will carry its own weight." Later that afternoon, rain went slate hard against the office trailer and eased. The yard darkened early. Headlights threw slanted rectangles across the gravel. The forklift lifted a pallet like a Roman numeral and set it down with care. Nathan hauled 3 loads he should have left for morning. Riley checked the hose splices and whatever was left in the truck bed that didn't belong there. 2 days after that, the sun returned like a lamp, turned up a notch at a time. In the conference room, where the fan was a memory and the view faced the river, we met a man in a linen shirt who shook hands like he counted each one. He introduced himself as Hayes Operations for a resort group with properties in Hawaii and Arizona, places where drought is a map, not a mood. "I've seen your cruise," he said, eyes on me, then on Priya. "Clean lines. No drama installations that look the same at 6 months as they did at day 1. We're expanding. We need drought-tolerant design that works for guests and budgets." I slid a presentation across the work we'd done along the coast, then inland, then where rain is rare. Wayfarer Botanics hybrids sat in the photographs like proof. Nathan arrived halfway through hair, still damp, hands clean, eyes clearer than the day before. He stood at the back and studied the numbers. Riley didn't come in. He was on the yard moving a delivery out of the weather. We walked the group through a test bed behind the warehouse aisles of trial plantings with tags. Boots crunched on oyster shell. The air had that bright mineral smell cold days keep for themselves. Hayes crouched next to a bed of low silver shrubs that held their shape without flinching at wind. Names he asked. I told him. Priya quoted survival rates from her card. Nathan described the install sequence like someone teaching a thing he'd done more than once. No one oversold. The ground itself did some of the talking. In the conference room again, Hayes tapped the pen against the contract he'd brought in his leather folio, then signed and dated in a hand that knew how to finish. The number on page 3 steadied the season. We shook hands. He left with a packet of schedule and a list of contact numbers that worked. That evening, the yard looked nearly clean before dark. A boy new to the crew tried to move a stone bench by himself and lifted the wrong way. Riley saw it and crossed at a steady clip. He took the other end and said one word, together, and the bench went where it should without anybody bragging. At 7, when the crews had scattered and the forklifts were quiet, Nathan came by my office door and leaned on the frame. She's resting, he said. They say Hope gains an ounce a day now. Good, I said. He nodded at the stack on my desk. The roads file sat beside the resort contract, green and gray, making their own still life. That's a lot, he said. It is, I said. He stood there a second longer, the way a man stands in a room where he won't stay, then pushed off the frame and headed for the trailer where Priya kept the books honest, even when no one was watching. The pocket watch ticked in my palm. I set it down and signed the internal routing for the new account Inc. clean date square in the box. On the drive home, the river ran flat as sheet metal in the afterlight. Cypress Hill sat above at windows, throwing out small rectangles of warmth. In the guest cottage, a lamp glowed behind a blind. I parked, listened to the engine tick itself cool, and went inside. The night held its breath. Papers lay where they belonged. The pen sat where Rob used to leave it, capped and parallel to the edge. Somewhere in town, a fan turned in a room that wasn't mine. The hour found its place and kept it. By the time azaleas flared along the fence line, the numbers for the year had settled where they belonged. Martin brought a navy folder to the conference room and set it beside Priya's laptop. The river laid its bright band beyond the windows. The fan overhead was quiet. Spring had its own air. We've completed the review, Martin said. He opened the folder. On top, an addendum typed clean and plain. Beneath it, attendance logs, expense sheets, payroll audits marked in Priya's small hand. Nathan stood at the back in a work shirt, sleeves rolled. Tessa sat beside me, a spiral notebook on her knee. Riley leaned against the jamb, forearms crossed, boots clean from the hose he'd just coiled. Compliance is perfect, Priya said, eyes on the numbers. No exceptions. Community hours exceeded target. Martin tapped the page once with his pen. Per the consent settlement, the principal balances step down. Effective on signature, the remaining liability reduces to $45,000. No one cheered. The room stood still the way good news stands when it knows where to be. Tessa's hand went to her throat and came down slow. Nathan exhaled like he'd been holding a plank. Riley's eyes flicked to me and away again. Martin slid the addendum toward my side of the table and uncapped a pen. I didn't use it. I reached into my bag for Rob's and set the black lacquer steady in my fingers. The nib found the line. Ink took the page and made it final. Executed, Martin said. He turned another sheet over. Rhodes, he said. State brought charges. Your materials mattered. He pled out on wire fraud and false filings. Restitution set. The court's order arrived yesterday. Tessa's shoulder loosened a fraction. She didn't speak. Priya angled the order so I could see the seal. The paper looked like it wanted to weigh more than it did. We moved to other pages that weren't ceremony. A vendor aging report that read short the maintenance budget with just enough fat to keep trucks faithful. Nathan took the seat nearest the window and sat forward, elbows on the table. The east lot needs resealing, he said, after the last truck leaves tonight. Approved, I said. Priya made the note. Riley shifted off the jam. Crew can do it in 2 pulls, he said. No one gets fancy with cones. Works, I said. The meeting broke without speeches. On Broad Street, a tour group passed under the windows with a guide's flag bobbing like a small buoy. We filed into the yard the way people do when the day still needs finishing. At noon, Hayes from the resort group appeared in a linen jacket and sunburned ears, shook hands in the shade of the awning, and left with a copy of the maintenance schedule and a bag of sample soil Priya had labeled with a Sharpie. He admired the test bed again and squinted just long enough to suggest he'd bring someone back who signed larger. He left a note folded around a check for the first milestone. It sat on my desk until the ink dried. In the late afternoon, a box arrived at the trailer with a state seal on the envelope taped to the top. Tessa opened it by the corner and laid a certificate on the desk, Payroll Administration Certified. Her mouth made the shape of a smile. She didn't push on anyone. Priya looked over, read the word, and nodded once. "Seat's yours," she said, sliding her chair 2 inches to the right. Riley came into my office just before 5 with a badge in a small plastic sleeve and dirt under his nails. Foreman sat in block letters above his name. He held it up as if proving that the word was the right size. "Fits," he said. "It does," I said. He hooked it to his pocket and walked back out, stopping only to take a broom from a new hire and show him how to push from the shoulders instead of the wrists. The kid watched his hands like he was learning a language. Nathan knocked with 2 fingers and set an envelope on the corner of my blotter. Inside, a printout from a credit union, the header plain, the figure at the bottom small and not small at all. "For the apprentice fund," he said. 2 enrolled this spring, both showing up. "Good," I said. I initialed the deposit slip and handed it back. In the evening light, the yard looked clean enough to sign the way a countertop looks when you finish a hard meal and leave no crumbs. Trucks backed into their slots on the first try. A pallet went to shelter without argument. From the trailer, the laser printer ran a short job and stopped. At 7, I walked the shell path behind the warehouse. The test beds threw back a silver-green glow. Out beyond the fence, the river took the day and laid it flat. In the guest cottage, a lamp came on and went soft behind a shade. Through the open window, I could hear Hope's small breath, the even engine of it, and the low murmur of Tessa's voice counting measure on a lullaby that didn't need to rhyme. I set the pocket watch in my palm and felt its round weight warm against my skin. The second hand kept its modest circle. Somewhere on the other side of the yard, a rake's tines clicked twice against concrete and were lifted. Priya turned off the desk lamp and pulled the trailer door to. Riley killed the bay lights 1 string at a time. Nathan locked the tool cage and tugged the handle once to be certain. Back at the house, papers lay square. Rob's pen rested parallel to the blotter's edge the way he used to leave it. I set the signed addendum beneath the clip and closed the folder. The hinge made a clean sound, and then none. The room held an ordinary silence, the kind that tells you every number has a place. I took the watch and slid it back into my pocket. The hour set itself. The house breathed in its familiar way. The river ran true. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.